Hello, everybody. Good evening. My name is Cynthia Alvarez, and this is the Grand Boulevard Coalition Show. Today, we'll be talking about goal settings and resilience, kind of talking about how those two things go together. Resiliency as a whole, really, you can go a lot into depth with it. But for the sake of today's show, we're going to talk more specifically about how goal setting and resiliency kind of connects together, how it can be utilized in terms of working with youth or even using it for yourself, right? If you're someone that maybe struggles with goal setting, hopefully this can kind of help you learn more about the tips and tricks, the benefits of goal setting, learning about long-term, short-term goals, maybe things that you might not have known about the works of goal setting. But yeah, so that's what we'll be getting into today. But before we get into that, I just wanted to do a quick recap of an event that Healthy Living, our number one goal, was just a part of, which was the Maddie Hunter Health Fair event. It was a lot of back to school giveaways and information from other organizations coming together to give resources to the community, specifically near the IIT University campus. So if you were there, hopefully you were able to get some good information, participate in their activities and other things they had going on. And hopefully you were able to see us there as well. We gave out a lot of good information, of course, related to HIV, substance misuse, prevention, giving out some goodie bags with information, prevention, information and things like that. So yeah, that was basically what we did. And if you want to look forward to learning about more events that we might have coming up this month, feel free to follow us on Facebook or Instagram at CAP Healthy Living or Healthy Living CAP. Those are the usernames for Instagram and Facebook. So feel free to look us up. But yeah, so getting a little bit into our topic for today, we are doing a discussion around goal setting and resilience, like I mentioned. And of course, thinking about the importance of that, we want to highlight creating and setting goals for ourselves and others as a powerful tool which can help empower and get youth to look forward to and reflect on things they can achieve and look back on things that they have achieved, right, through that goal setting to hopefully motivate them to pursue bigger and better goals, right? And it's important to think about all goals, how they can start big or small. They're all important and they all play a role into who we are and who we become as a person, right? So, yeah, kind of getting a little bit into that. So resilience specifically is something that develops through growing up in our environment and also from being taught by others around us to use healthy tools to cope when navigating difficult experiences, right? So wherever you grow up in your environment, you look at your community as a whole, you also look at the people you grow up with as a whole, individually and separately, right? So kind of thinking about, the family you grew up with within your household, but also maybe the friends that you might have growing up in middle school, high school, that kind of all shapes you as a person, and helps you kind of learn how the other people around you cope with difficult situations, right? So especially your parents or people that you look up to that are older, especially being a young, impressionable child, you learn how older adults handle trauma or just any difficult situation. You kind of learn from that and think, oh, this is how they react to these things. And so that kind of goes into your brain and absorbs into your brain as this is the way that things should be done or should be, this is how you should react to these things, right? So resilience has a lot to do with your upbringing, your environment, and just the things that you learn around you, right? And even, the lack of those things, people, with resilience, it kind of varies, right? Some people have a strong sense of resiliency. Some people maybe are just starting to learn how to be resilient, right? And it can start at any different age. It doesn't have to start when you're young. You can start as an adolescent, as a young adult too. So it really doesn't, matter the age you start, just as long as you're trying to become resilient. That can really do a lot of good for you with your mental health, your mental well-being, and just being able to persevere when you encounter difficult situations, right? So yeah, so thinking more about what is resilience, the definition specifically of resilience, according to the American Psychological Association, it is the process of successfully adapting to difficult or challenging life experiences, especially through mental, emotional, and behavioral flexibility and adjustment to external and internal demands. So, kind of that sense, that word of adapting, right? Thinking about being able to adapt to your environment in a healthy way and cope with things in a healthy way, right? We talk a lot about coping mechanisms and coping habits that you can develop that can be unhealthy, such as coping with mental health to maybe drink or to use other substances to kind of suppress those negative feelings that you might be feeling. Those are some things that are considered negative coping mechanisms, right? And so when you think about resiliency and healthy coping mechanisms, that can be, learning how to regulate your own emotions in a healthy way, learning to process, have patience with yourself and have patience with others, to be able to sit back in a situation and try to think of what's the best way that I can handle this, right? And what's, the way that leads to maybe the least amount of consequences, right? How can I handle a situation, maybe de-escalate a situation that I might be in. So that's kind of having resilience, right? And that flexibility. So adaptability, flexibility, and adjustment. Like those are some of the big, keywords that kind of go with resiliency, right? And it's just the ability to do that. So learn how to do it, and then it kind of eventually becomes your natural response, right? So it might become something that you don't even have to think about. It just comes naturally to you. And that's how you know that you've built up that resilience over time. And thinking about resilience and trauma, you want to think about how you handle maybe a traumatic situation, right? And that kind of goes along with suppressing those feelings. If you don't have resilience, you might kind of avoid talking about these feelings with yourself or talking to somebody else about these feelings, right? And kind of being able to process and learn about your emotions. With that resiliency, it's not to say that trauma doesn't affect you, right? Because trauma affects everybody and it affects everybody differently, right? And it's not to say that, oh, this difficult thing that happened to me, it won't even affect me. It will affect you, and it will affect you in a way that maybe you haven't experienced before, right? So it's a new traumatic situation. Kind of going back to another example, such as maybe you experienced community violence, right? Maybe something happened in your community that really shook you up. And some people's reactions might be, fear, not wanting to go outside as much, avoiding interactions with people. Social anxiety can be something that could develop, right? Which can further isolate you and really have an impact on your mental health, right? So, versus maybe if you had that experience, you are shaken up still, it still affects you. You take your time to process those feelings, like the fear, thinking about how scary that situation was, but then being able to maybe seek a therapist and say, maybe I want to talk to somebody, a professional that might be able to help me process these feelings so that I am not living in fear, right? So instead of isolating yourself, you are branching out in your community to kind of help you with that. And then in that way, it improves your mental health, right? So that's kind of an example that I wanted to talk about with resilience. And with resilience, there is something called the 7 C's of resilience. So when I say C's, I mean the letter C. So there is 7 C's with resilience, and those are competence, confidence, coping, control, character, connection, and contribution. So, learning about these 7 C's, we won't get too much into depth with those, but learning further about those things can kind of help us teach ourselves. And if we work with youth, it can help us teach youth, how we can build that resilience, right? So, learning about these 7 C's, I'll go over them briefly just so that you can get a sense of what these each words mean. So, in no particular order, competence is basically recognizing and utilizing your strengths and skills to effectively handle situations, right? So, whatever skills you might have developed, you're able to use those, like I said, with de escalation, for example, right? Having that de escalation skill to make sure that things don't go south, to make sure that maybe people who were acting aggressive towards each other don't end up hurting each other. Um, Being able to calm somebody down from a crisis situation, things like that. And then confidence, is, of course, believing in one's abilities and capacity to cope with challenges and make sound decisions. So this kind of goes with if you're working maybe with a client and you want to, teach them specific skills, you want to work with them, and they might be a little skeptical at first, maybe working with you, or just working in a setting where they've never worked with a therapist, they never worked with a community resource before, so they're a little bit hesitant. You having that confidence with them and reassurance with them, saying that this is going to help you, these are some things you can do, making sure you kind of establish that with them, and also within yourself, right? Having those moments of confidence when maybe other people might be doubting you or might say that, oh no, this isn't right, or you shouldn't do this. If you're sure within yourself and you know that you're not hurting anybody, you're not hurting yourself, that's all that matters in those decisions that you make. And having that confidence to stand up for yourself in any situation, too, maybe in a bullying situation, having that confidence to speak up or talk to somebody, talk to an adult, a friend, even that takes a lot of courage and confidence. So being able to do that, really helps build that resilience as well. And then also thinking about connection, having a strong sense of belonging and supportive relationships with family, friends, and communities. So connection really goes a lot with support systems, right? Having those support systems. People who have support systems are more likely to have resilience because they have other people around them that can back them up or be there for them. If you're going through something, you are able to say, hey, I have this friend, or I have my parents, and I can talk to them because they're always there for me and I can rely on them, right? So having people you can rely on, having those support systems that you can rely on really does help build that confidence and creates connections. Even connections, like I said, through your community, right, can also be connect with resilience. Um, Also thinking about character, having a strong moral compass, understanding right and wrong, and acting with integrity. So having good character, it there's a lot that goes into that, but basically kind of thinking about being able to perceive a situation and understand people's perspectives, maybe, right? So saying, okay, I can see this person's point of view, but I also want them to understand my point of view, and being able to have that kind of healthy, productive discussion. Um, and, in other situations, just thinking about what's the right thing to do in a specific situation, right? Or being able to reflect on things that you might have done wrong and being able to reflect from that, right? So maybe making a mistake or making a wrong choice, it can lead to somebody getting hurt, and that doesn't make you a bad person. Just knowing how to handle those situations from now on and saying, okay, I reflected on this situation and I realize this is what I did wrong and this is how I can improve as a person, right? That kind of helps build your character and can inspire other people around you, to say, if you have a group of friends and they say, oh, I like how my friend handled that, I want to do things like that and I look up to that. So kind of being that person for other people, right? Just making sure that you have a good moral compass, good head on your shoulders. That character, having a strong character can really help with resilience. And contribution. So, contribution is the feeling that one's actions make a positive difference in the world, fostering a sense of purpose and meaning, right? So, kind of in a way, finding your calling. And it doesn't have to necessarily be one thing, right? That everybody has this one thing. It can be multiple things. It can be small, meaningful things, big, meaningful things. It's all meaningful, right? As long as it's something that helps build you up as a person, it's something that brings you joy. Even taking part in clubs, being part of events, volunteering. These are all things that build up that confidence and build up that sense of purpose within yourself of saying, oh, I'm really passionate about, maybe contributing to my community, doing these, volunteer events every here and there. It really helps you feel like you're a part of something and a part of something that matters, right? If you're doing something to help your community, you feel like you are a resource to these people and in your community. And it kind of builds that sense of, builds a sense of self and builds a sense of, this is what I do and I enjoy doing this, right? And it can be big or small. You can start with volunteering in your community, even donating, to things that you're passionate about. And yeah, so those are kind of some things, having less of a sense of pessimism, where, that's kind of the opposite of optimism, right? So kind of thinking about pessimism where you believe that nothing that you do matters. You believe that nothing, really makes a strong contribution to the world. And, what's the point of doing it, right? So you're going to be pessimistic and you're going to not engage in these things because you believe it doesn't make a difference. And so that can really affect your own mental health as well, right? If you're not doing things that you're passionate about, not looking for things that you might be interested in, it kind of can isolate you. You will have less of support systems if you're not branching out or making new friends. You might, like, things that you might be missing out on, right? So these are all things that can kind of contribute to that. And having a more positive outlook, you're definitely, even if it's not making a big difference in the world, you think, hey, at least it's making a difference in my community where I live, or it's making a difference in me, in my mental health, my mental well-being, and I'm improving myself as a person, right? So these kinds of things matter, and kind of learning that habit, because it's a habit that you definitely have to develop. It's not something that just comes naturally, right? Um, so yeah, that's also connected with resiliency. And then thinking about coping, which is something that we talked about as well. So coping is one of the 7 C's, and that is developing healthy strategies to manage stress, emotions, and difficult situations. So some of the examples I already gave earlier for coping, but thinking about other examples for coping, we talked about this in other shows, but thinking about breathing exercises, right? If you're somebody who deals with anxiety, you have to practice these tools that can help you to alleviate, stress that you might be feeling in the moment, right? High stress situations. If you're dealing with something in the moment, you want to say, okay, I learned how to do box breathing, so I'm going to do box breathing. It's going to help me regulate my breathing and it's going to help me calm down, right? And doing other things, learning other methods, things that can calm us down, even, using tips through social media. If you're in groups with other people that say, hey, I struggle with anxiety and this works for me, and you're trying these new things, right? That say, okay, I'm going to give this a shot because I want to try and open up my toolkit and see what else I can add to it, right? And there was something that I learned through social media, that people with anxiety or people who might be dealing with panic attacks, people who suffer from frequent panic attacks, use methods to try to distract themselves, so that way it kind of snaps them out of that headspace where they feel like they're about to have a panic attack. Some people say sour candy is a strategy that people have used and that works, because eating that sour candy when you're, I guess, in a heightened state, it kind of distracts from those feelings and from those emotions. And I found that really interesting. And a lot of people said that it worked for them. Obviously, what works for somebody isn't going to work for everybody. But like I said, it's worth trying something new, right? And then if it does work, you realize you can add it to the toolbox, which is pretty cool. So kind of doing that, learning more coping mechanisms, and then with that, you're able to share with your friends, your family that may also suffer from other, mental health issues that might say, hey, this works for me, maybe it'll work for you, and being that resource for other people too. And the last one is control. Recognizing what aspects of a situation are within one's control and focusing on those. So, looking at a situation and saying, okay, I can't control this person's emotions and I can't control how they're going to react to this event that happened, but I'm going to control how I react to however they react, right? So, just, maintaining maybe a calm state if someone else is reacting in a way that might put you in danger, somebody else in danger, knowing that, okay, let me take a step back from the situation so that way I don't put myself in danger. Um, and just knowing when to remove yourself from a situation, right? So, kind of having that situational awareness kind of goes with that. And knowing how to observe your environment and knowing when it's time to go, knowing when it's time to remove yourself from that so that you don't get hurt or other people don't get hurt, right? So yeah, kind of having that sense of control and just knowing that, okay, as long as I'm in control of my emotions and my reactions, then I'm okay, right? So that's kind of important to think about. And with goal setting related to all of this with resilience, it can be a tool that can really add some benefits to your life, right? And so with goal setting, it can improve your decision making skills. It can improve your focus, improves motivation, your organizational and planning skills, and your ability to adjust and bounce back, right? So that kind of goes a lot with resiliency, having that adaptability, and being able to kind of be flexible with whatever happens, right? Because maybe you set a goal for yourself that you want to achieve, and then maybe something gets in the way of that goal, right? It can be discouraging in the moment, but then you think about, okay, you know what? I just need to take a step back and readjust. And even if I couldn't complete my goal in the specific time I wanted, maybe you have a new goal now that you need to prioritize first and say, okay, I'm going to move this goal back and I'm going to prioritize this other goal and I'm going to focus on that first. So, kind of having that ability to be flexible with yourself and say, okay, I'm not going to be hard on myself even if I couldn't finish this goal. I just have a new goal that's in place that I need to focus on, right? So, being able to do that really kind of goes with resiliency and being confident in yourself and your choices that you make and readjusting the plan, right? Because life gets in the way. There's always going to be things that get in the way of your goals, but it's just learning how to handle those situations, right? And yeah, so with whenever you achieve a goal, it can really give you that sense of motivation to continue setting new goals, right? If you're working with youth, just telling them, okay, if you want to set this goal, you can start with really easy goals that can be really easy to achieve, even if that means, okay, my next goal is filling out a job application. So I want to fill out this a job application by the end of next week. And once they do that, that's a goal completed. That can kind of add that motivation and a sense of achievement, like, oh, I did that and that I achieved the goal that I wanted. And now they kind of have that sense of, okay, what's next? I want to achieve something else. I want to make a new goal, right? So you can really work with having goals. It can be very, there's a lot of leeway. There's a lot of flexibility with goals. You can have short-term goals. Like I said, for example, the job application is a short-term goal, right? A long-term goal could be, I want to invest in some stocks and I want to start saving money, right? So thinking about with that goal, how much money do you want to save? How are you going to do that, right? What do you want to invest in specifically? How much are you going to invest? Are you going to invest monthly? Do you want to do bi-monthly? So thinking about that can really help you stay true to your goals because you're now like, okay, I'm going to do this goal, but you have to learn what it takes to get to that goal, right? So thinking about that, there's a wide range in goals that you can achieve. It's just a matter of sorting out which ones are more important in the moment and also which ones might be the easiest to achieve first, right? And that can really motivate people to continue doing that. And yeah, so those are a few tips and tricks to kind of get people started. There will be a youth talk in the near future where I will be working with people doing goal setting activities, and we'll be going a lot more in depth with those activities. If you are interested, like I said, please feel free to follow us on our social medias. It will be in a couple Saturdays from now. But yeah, just feel free to check our social medias for that flyer coming soon. But I hope you learned a little bit about resiliency and goal setting today, and I appreciate you all taking the time to watch. I hope you all have a good rest of your evening, and I will see you all next time. Good night.